Into the woods, into the woods, into the woods and out of the woods and home before.
Hello and welcome to a special Community Spotlight episode of the QT Cast. That's the official podcast for the QTRL, the Queer and Trans Research Lab housed at the Bonham Centre for Sexual Diversity Studies at the University of Toronto. My name is Elliott, and in today's episode, I sit down with the wonderful and talented Lee Stone, founder of Dead Name Theatre and director-producer of Dead Name Theatre's Into the Woods. In this episode, you'll hear Lee discuss the mission behind Dead Name Theatre and get some sneak peeks of what it's like directing and producing an entirely trans, non-binary, and queer-led production of Into the Woods. Stay tuned after the interview for a special recording of rehearsals, courtesy of Lee. Into the Woods is running June 2nd to June 11th at Theatre Pass Marai, and head now to Theatre Pass Marai box office for your tickets. Without further ado, here's Lee.
My name is Lee Stone. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a multidisciplinary theater artist, but these days I'm founder and I guess artistic director of Dead Name Theatre, which is a brand new company. And I'm currently directing and co-producing a concert production of Into the Woods, which will be our first production happening in June this year.
That is so exciting. Thank you so much. And our listeners will also recognize you because you were in Taya Kasahara's program last year. Is that correct?
I was, yeah. Sort of a twist of fate is actually this production Into the Woods was meant to go up in June.
That's right.
Of last year. But due to circumstances, like community building just tends to need time, and anything pushing against the grain needs time.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a decision in February to push back a year, and I'm glad we did because it's allowed us to really push further. But because of that, I was able to be part of Taya's project, which was so much fun.
Amazing. Yeah, it was fantastic. Speaking of pushing against the grain and Dead Name Theatre, can you just give our listeners a little bit of a rundown about what the mission of the company is, what your focus is mainly, and then also if you want to give us kind of a little spiel on the name itself, because I find it quite awesome and interesting.
Yeah, sure. Dead Name Theatre has three leading values, which are representation, community, and storytelling as activism. With representation, we seek to provide more opportunities for the immensely talented theater practitioners who have been denied opportunity because of their marginalized gender and sexual identities. D&T aims to create a rehearsal space that is populated by trans, non-binary, and queer creatives, from actors to designers, directors, stage managers, and front of house team. And besides providing opportunities, we believe this representation will inspire the next generation because we strive to be the representation we never had as youth. In regards to community, with a rehearsal space where we are the majority, we will be able to tell a trans, non-binary, and queer story from a place of authenticity and support rather than tokenism. Our representation on stage is far and few between and can often fall into stereotypes and tokenism in character portrayals of these identities. But if we create as a community, we can offer a more nuanced representation of trans, non-binary, and queer characters on stage while simultaneously reducing the toxic and harmful rehearsal practices that our community has learned to survive in. And the question we are asking is, if an actor feels affirmed by their cast, crew, and creative team, what level of performance might they be able to reach? And lastly, with storytelling as activism, this relates to the core of why we all do theater, that if we tell a nuanced, authentic, beautiful, heartbreaking, and relatable trans, non-binary, and queer story, we can begin to reclaim our full humanity from our audience. If we can share in our storytelling what the weight of transphobia, transmisogyny, envyphobia, queerphobia, and homophobia does to our community, our audience might be able to offer us empathy and start to dismantle these phobias in their own minds.
As I'm listening to you, talk about the mission, I'm interested in a lot of conversations around trans and gender nonconforming. People tend to, unfortunately, necessarily sometimes focus on the negative, right? Like, the toxic practices that your company is trying to avoid. But I'd like to shift that and talk, maybe have you talk about, what does it feel like for this to be in this space? What does it feel like for these actors? What is the energy in that space of just, total transgender nonconforming joy?
Oh my goodness. Like, I think for so many of us, even just watching people meet each other for the first time, we kind of eased into a full cast rehearsal with sort of one-on-one or duet music rehearsals. And with each new person meeting each new person, there was like this tangible energy and excitement that was happening of like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only person in this production. I don't have to do trans 101 when I introduce myself to a new person, and suddenly we were all in the room, and it just felt like there was this collective exhale of like, okay, I can just be a performer now. I can just be, a creative in a space collaborating with other creators, and my identity is not going to be like a hang up, or like it's not going to be in the way in a way. And I know that I don't really like the way that sounds, but I feel like that's at least how I felt, is like, okay, I can just exist in this space.
I totally get what you mean. And especially relate to the trans 101 comment. It feels like so often it is the brunt and the burden of trans people to make everyone feel comfortable and safe, and meet cis folks on their level, and to talk about our identities. And so I totally get how special it would be for creative people to just have the creation and the act of creation be the focus, and not transness, as special and important as transness is in that space. So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And Lee, I also know that part of your mandate at Dead Name Theatre is to not have social media focused advertising. I find that really interesting. Could you maybe say a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's this constant balance with many things, to acknowledge where we're at and also where we want to get to. And I know that a lot of people in our community have found help and community and support online. I would never deny that's been a really incredibly valuable part of social media. I mean, like, the social movements of today are happening on social media, and that's really important to acknowledge. At the same time, social media is a capitalist entity, and our company strives to be anti-capitalist because capitalism does not support trans and non-binary people. And a lot of the marginalizations that we all experience is not supported by capitalism, and in fact is a product of capitalism. And so to me, it felt a little bit, it felt like it would have been a little hypocritical to work in a capitalist way while also trying to be anti-capitalist. And so we had a big conversation about whether to have social media at all. And I will say that we do have social media. We have pages, but they're really, we think about them more as landing points, so that people can easily find us, because again, our community is online and we know that and want to reach them. But we do hope that people will see it as kind of a bridge off of social media and kind of onto our website, and that most of the information can be found there, or they can just reach out to us directly. We want to be available to people. Yeah, it went during this conversation, it was very much like, it's just, I think one of our folks said that, like, the revolution is not going to be delivered in an Amazon box. It's like, it's not going to come from that source. And I think our community has done a really excellent job of making it for us. And at the end of the day, it's not. So that was the reason for that. Also, I personally, as an individual, am not on social media for mental health reasons. A decision I made a few years ago, and it's been a really, really wonderful decision. I'm a lot safer and healthier than I used to be. And so I couldn't possibly, have a company be fully online if I myself as an individual am not. That would have not felt sat right with my values.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Thank you for sharing that. It's funny, my dissertation research is actually on online social media activism for queer and trans people, and like the 5-second soundbite, 5-minute soundbite you just gave is like, that's it. So you nailed it. That's the ambivalence it's just so tricky, and it's cool to see and hear how you're navigating this as a company, but also personally. So thank you for that. I'm wondering, Lee, can you talk through the name of Dead Name Theater a little bit? Maybe also for our cis listeners who maybe don't know what that also means to trans people as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Here's some Trans 101.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I would say that dead name, the phrase, the term is, I can never say this word, is colloquial. Is that the term?
Yeah, totally.
I can never say that. So
Nailed
obviously, it's very much it's an of our community kind of phrase, which tends to refer to a name that you might have been assigned at birth, or that you are legally bound to in some way that you no longer use. And so for a lot of people's dead names, bring up very complicated feelings, because for a lot of us, they do come from our parents. And so depending on our relationship with our parents, that might bring around a whole range of emotions. But it also often will speak to a person's, pre-transition experience and pre-transition history. And so another reason it brings up complex emotions is because it's kind of the before times, the before we were in the know of ourselves, our identities, and those times for a lot of us tend to be, or at least for me, were painful and challenging. And so it's hard to think of myself in those terms, especially because it's not only who I'm not anymore, but arguably it's never who I was, but it's someone I was striving to be because of outside pressure. So that, in a nutshell, is what dead name means. I will say the reason for the company name for me is it is specifically named after my dead name, because I am lucky in that I have a great relationship with my parents. It's obviously challenging at times, because whose isn't? But in general, I have parents who are supportive and try, and that's I hate to say it, but it's a low bar for a community.
I hear that, and it's important to say that for sure.
Yeah, it really is. That just like acceptance is like, it's out of reach for so many of us. Yeah.
And doesn't change the fact that it still should be baseline.
Yes. Yeah. But for me, when changing my name, it was hard to let go of my dead name, because I do have a good relationship with my parents, and they picked it for me, and it means worthy of love. And so there was, an emotion and a feeling there of like my parents telling me in my name that I was worthy of love, which I think is a really important message to never let go of. And so when letting go of the name, I sort of named, something that I was going to put my baby. I named my baby after my dead name, and it's also, it is a message to our community, especially now that we are worthy of love, that we deserve love, because so much of our community is under direct attack these days, and that's not the messaging. And so wanting this company to stand for that we as a community are worthy of love every single time, even if we let go of a name.
Oof, I got goosebumps a couple of times already. So thank you for that. Can we talk a little bit about your upcoming productions, plural, right? Because you're putting one on, but you're also currently casting for a second one.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about our Fringe show.
Mm.
Our Fringe show is called Hermaphroditus, and it's a world premiere of a play by Rosalind Goodwin. So yes, we are casting for 2 roles for that show. So, putting that out there. I'm personally not doing too much on that show. I'm obviously supporting as like the artistic director of the company, but so I'm just kind of in there, and like whatever they need is what I'm supporting.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so let's jump into the woods now. Can you plug where can folks get tickets? When will the show be? And then also maybe a little bit about what drew Dead Name Theatre to Into the Woods as a production to put on.
Yeah, so tickets have been on sale now for about a week, and they're doing really well, which is so exciting. It's quite an intimate space, is something I want people to be aware of. Like, it's a 50-seat capacity, and we have 8 shows. So I would say buy your tickets early if you're able to. I think that's going to be key, especially like the closer we get to opening. But yes, we open on June 2nd, and then we close on June 11th. We have 2 Friday nights, 2 Saturday matinees, 2 Saturday evenings, and 2 Sunday matinees. And all the information can be found on Theatre Passmarai's website under box office. And yeah, we were very lucky to be presenting both of our shows actually at Theatre Passmarai. Into the Woods will be in the backspace theater, while Hermaphroditus will be in the main space for Fringe. Yeah.
And can you tell our listeners why Into the Woods? What drew the company to this production?
I would love to. Into the Woods for me is one of those shows that every time I watch it, I find something new, or the words kind of resonate for me in a new way. And this is a show that I have grown up watching from birth. My father writes musicals. I was raised on Sondheim.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And yeah, both of my parents are very big on musical theater. So I was just around. I have a worn out VHS copy of the original Broadway production, and it is the kind of thing I would just pop on after school, or like, the older I got, I'd put it on at least once or twice a year to just feel good and sing along. Eventually had to be replaced with a DVD copy. So well loved. But I think why specifically this show rings a very special note for me is it is a fairy tale, and I never really saw myself represented in fairy tales, and I think what I liked about this show is that the first act is the fairy tales. Well, actually, I should talk about the story of the show a bit. It's if Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, Rapunzel, and Little Red Riding Hood all existed in the same universe and met and interacted with each other. And so the first act is the fairy tales as you've known them, almost exactly as they are, with just a few artistic liberties here and there. And it's funny because by the end of Act 1, you go out into intermission and you think, oh my goodness, is the show over? Like, everyone lived happily ever after. Like, isn't that the end of the story? And But, Act Two begins and we open with these characters who are like, I think I'm happy. I got my wish. I must be happy. And through the journey of Act Two, we start to realize that, the happily ever after is not always the story that works for everybody, or what everybody wants. And I like Cinderella, for example, has this great line that's like, my father's house was a nightmare, your house, referring to the prince, was a dream, and now I find I want something in between. And that is just, again, is a huge trans non-binary experience right there, is especially when like Cinderella's whole journey is a trans woman's story. Just gonna say that it always has been. Let's be honest.
Very important to say. I love that.
So she gets this opportunity to like go to a ball and like be affirmed in her gender and like experience that for the first time. And of course she goes big and femme because like finally, and but what surprises her is like, oh, well, now I'm like being pursued by a prince. Like what, didn't see that coming? Like that's now an adjustment I have to like process and think of like I never thought someone would see me, like want me as myself exactly as I am. Again, big part of, trans experience. And so she gets her wish at the end of Act One and she marries a prince. And then her journey in Act Two is figuring out like, was marriage actually what I wanted? Was this hyper femme, expression what I wanted? Is this, I was in a prison in my father's house, and now am I in a prison again where I can't leave the palace without an escort? And so where is my freedom within both of those extremes? And that's her journey in Act Two. So I think part of why I love this show so much is I just saw myself represented in it, even though it's done. The original is super cis binary, like it's, oh my goodness, whoa, and so many patriarchal jokes. The ableism in this show, you would not believe. We're working through it. It's a thing. Oh my gosh.
like in Into the Woods, even, you mean?
Just fairy tales,
right?
Like,
of course, yeah.
Blindness as punishment is
right.
Like everywhere. It's
right.
everywhere. Yeah.
Wow. My
Yeah.
mind. Yeah, I haven't actually really thought about that before.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And so we've been doing a lot of discussion in terms of like where is, how can we some of this retelling, the retelling of the retelling
Right.
comes so naturally, it just fits into a trans non-binary experience, which is not to say that the script is perfect, right?
Sure.
There are still elements in there that are like, oof, cringy. Ooh, that's a line. Oh man. Okay. And it's always just a conversation with everyone on how to address those moments. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to proceed with that.
Yeah. It's so interesting you ask why this show, but I've, as a young trans non-binary person, really, really related to Jack and the Beanstalk. He has Cinderella, Jack, and Little Red all have what I call their monologues, which are really just their solo songs. And we don't actually see the major events. Like we don't see Cinderella at the ball. We don't see Jack at the Giant's world. We don't see Little Red in the belly of the wolf, but we hear about it afterwards. We get a glorious song afterwards as the character processes what that experience unlocked for them. And so Jack's song, Giants in the Sky, iconic song, so good, is about, he's left home for the first time. He's had an adventure. He's realized so many things about himself, and now he's returning home again. and the reframing of self as, not only after you've left home, but after you come back again for the first time.
Right.
And the reflection that gives a person. I remember, just as a young person, before I even had left home, really relating to that message of like wanting that adventure, wanting to know myself, because I'd climbed the beanstalk and had this grand adventure. And then, after I had returned home, really relating and reflecting on like, I feel safe at home, but I also don't always feel myself at home. And, why do I still want to go back to the land of the giants and have more adventures, even though I was scared but there was something about it that, I'm drawn to. So I related very deeply to Jack when I was younger, and these days I'm relating to the baker, actually, he's kind of an expanded character. He's the brother of Rapunzel. This is the easiest way to say that. But in the musical, he's like the everyday hero,
Right.
Him and his wife are the everyday people that are not super magical, and they just are trying to get by, and they're sort of the blank slate. But the baker's journey is learning to forgive his father who cursed his house. And the theme of learning how to forgive your parents, or even not passing on trauma from your parents to your children, the huge theme in this show. And so as I get older, I find I'm relating more and more to the baker. Just when the desire or the goal is really just like, can't we just pursue our lives with our children and our wives till that happy day arrives? How do we ignore all the witches, all the giants, all the curses, and just that, like, that desire for, I just want to live my life. I just want to be.
Wow. That's that resonates so deeply. I also do want to say, like, in me asking why this show, I don't want to kind of further the idea that trans non-binary creative people only have to create stuff about trans and non-binary existence.
Sure,
so I appreciate you taking that with grace and rolling with that. So to all our listeners, make sure you go to Theatre Pass Marais box office, get your tickets for Into the Woods, June 2nd to 11th. I'm so excited to see it and to hear about how it goes, and hopefully we can touch base again in the future. I'd love to have kind of an ongoing community spotlight thing with you if you'd like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to be back, and I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to speak to you and your listeners, and share in the trans joy that's about to take place.
Likewise, I'm so excited to hear from you and all the work that you're doing, and just I'm so grateful that spaces like this exist. And folks like you and your company exist. It's so wonderful. Just to end off, do you want to say maybe just like one nice experience you've had from either rehearsals or something that stuck out to you in the past, kind of recent past?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. There was a moment that we all cried. In a good way.
Good.
It really was when the baker sang that song that I just mentioned. And we were just doing a read through, so everybody was meeting for the second or third time, and that moment that we heard those words in that space, I think was a moment where we all were like, okay, we see it. It's here. This story in particular speaks to our community so deeply. I don't know. I think it was a shining moment for all of us, where we saw the end product, even though it was a second rehearsal. It was very powerful, and it was. I cannot explain with words the feeling that comes up for me hearing trans voices sing in unison and harmony together. because especially so many, like myself, so many of us have a dysphoria around our voices. Like it's going to be really hard for me to listen to this podcast. I'm going to do it, but it's going to be hard.
I hear that. I totally hear that.
But also, people who have medically transitioned, their voices change and it becomes a brand new relationship with something that that you're experiencing, like having to relearn how to exist with it. And so singing becomes a vastly, as Taya even mentioned, becomes a vastly complex relationship that if you decide to transition or not, medically transition or not medically transition, it's something that our community singers sit with constantly. That decision is weighty. And so hearing trans voices just sing so much joy and love into the room and hearing them in harmony, and it just moves me every single time. I just don't have words for what that experience is like. And so it's, in a way, not an accident we are doing a musical. I would say it's very specifically a reclaiming, not only of fairy tales, but of musical theater, of theater spaces, and singing, and what we consider to be a masculine or a feminine voice. Can we reclaim those narratives, that it's less about, who plays the man parts and who plays the women parts, and more about how do we sound unified together? How do we sound beautiful together?
I love that so much. And also just to have folks pause before you immediately associate sight with sound, or vice versa, or gender
Yes.
with what you see and what you hear. Like those things just aren't connected.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you. I think that's such a beautiful reminder for everybody. Leah, is there anything that we didn't get to touch on that you were hoping to talk about?
Oh, I guess that is one other thing I'd like to briefly mention, and I will try to do it briefly. Just kind of in reference to the clip, I think there's probably about maybe 17 characters that you'll hear in there.
Cool.
And I think there's like something like 23 characters in the show.
Mm.
But we are doing this show with 8 people. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you will hear 17 characters, but what's fun about it is that it's being done by 8 people.
Cool.
And the double casting in this show is done very intentionally, that we've specifically put non-binary actors as Jack and Little Red. Well, I should talk about each track on itself.
Yeah.
The Bakers are just playing the Bakers because, as the like everyday people, they are the one. I would say it's their journey, even though it's an ensemble show. Their story is what guides us through it.
Right.
Let's see. The witch is also playing Little Red's grandmother and Cinderella's mother, the spirit of Cinderella's mother. So that's the matriarch track. The narrator, there's a narrator that tells the story. The narrator is also playing Little Red's wolf, as well as the baker's father. And this choice here is we are really playing with like the idea of a narrator in like queer trans communities, like what that narrator role might be. Cool. So the narrator does lean towards kind of a cishet normativity that a lot of our queer community kind of grapples with every day.
That's so interesting.
And then Cinderella is also playing Rapunzel, and also playing Cinderella's steward as well. Jack is playing Cinderella's prince, as well as one of the evil stepsisters. Little Red is playing Rapunzel's prince and an evil stepsister, and Jack's mother is also playing Cinderella's stepmother. So we have an affirming mother contrasted with a non-affirming
by the same actor.
By the same actor, yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so we very intentionally tracked that for actors to have fun with, for not specifically non-binary actors to be non-binary on stage.
I love that so much. That's amazing.
Because I think we as non-binary actors are seen as like an inconvenience, or like, what do we even do with an actor like this? And the secret is that we can play all the roles.
Right.
If only
That's
people knew.
Right.
So you'll see a little bit of that, and I definitely, the actors are already having fun with those changes because they happen very quickly. So that will be part of the challenge for them.
When do you wrap up rehearsals?
Let's see, we're in our second week now. We're doing 4 weeks of rehearsals, and then we go into our tech. We have 2 weeks of shows. Wow, I know. We're almost halfway through.
That's so exciting.
I know. I never want it to end.
Congrats on this far. That's so wonderful.
Thank you.
1 minute gone, 1 minute gone. Into the woods, into the woods, into the woods and out of the woods and home before.
And the whole of it dark. Before. Dark.
Yes, it's
I get the cue.
Into the woods only in cursive, please.
Deep breaths, y'all.
1 midnight gone.
No knot unties itself.
Sometimes the things you most wish for are not to be touched.
The harder to get, the better to have. Agreed.
Never wear mauve in a ball.
Or pink.
Or open your mouth. The difference between a cow and a bean is a bean can begin an adventure. Slotted spoons don't hold much soup.
The prettier the flower, the further from the path.
The closer to the family, the closer to the wine.
1 midnight gone. Well, it's not the end of the world.
Opportunity is not a lengthy visitor.
You may know what you need, but to get what you want, better see that you keep what you have.
1 midnight gone. Sometimes the things you
harder
most
to
wish
get, the
for.
better
1
to
midnight
have.
gone. 1 midnight gone.
To get what you want, better keep what you have.
1 midnight gone, 1 midnight gone. Into the woods, into the woods, into the woods and out of the woods and home before.
They bar what?
Do I have to say what
Deep breaths.
It was me, wasn't it? One midnight gone.
No knot unties itself.
Sometimes the things you most wish for are not to be touched.
The harder to get, the better to have. Agreed.
Never wear mauve at a ball.
Or pink.
Or open your mouth.
The difference between a cow and a bean is a bean can begin an adventure. Slotted spoons don't hold much soup.
The prettier the flower, the
the world.
A servant is not just a dog to the prince. Opportunity is not a lengthy visitor. Know what you have, but to get what you want, better see that you keep what you have.
One midnight gone. Sometimes the things you most wish for.
One
One midnight gone. One midnight
To
gone.
get what you want, better see what you have.
One midnight gone.
One midnight gone into the woods.